No walk in the park, a COVID diary, Annexed notes from an ancient underbelly, one man's response to a potentially fatal crisis in human destiny. Youth should never be wasted on aging badly. Day 1, pathogenic priming. May the fear be in us. You need to be afraid. You need to be very afraid. Don't you just love a good horror movie? Evil lurking round every corner, Jack the Ripper on the prowl, a flitting shadow in the woods. You're lost and it's getting darker by the second. You're being followed. You're being stalked. A sudden noise down in the basement. The lights go out. The French windows fly open. A sudden gust of wind from nowhere. A cryptically anonymous death threat slipped under the door, or a warning you are not alone. But you've never felt more alone in your life, and so vulnerable. You look at the kitchen knives, realize there's one missing, and you're afraid you can't rise to the occasion. You're no hero, no was ever meant to be, a victim of your own fear, easy prey for any predator. There's a knock on the door, your neighbor asking you, is everything all right? But why would they be asking that in the middle of the night? Suddenly that harmless figure you've been waving to every morning for the past 20 years, trimming their rose bushes, doesn't seem so harmless. That look in their eyes, something does not bode well. You're not safe, not even in your own home. You lock all your doors, bar the windows, jump into bed and pull the sheets over your head, but you can't sleep. You know you may never wake up in the morning, or if you do, you'll be outlined in chalk marks with some masked stranger in a white coat and plastic gloves probing at some of your most private parts. The world is closing in on you. This is not funny. You no longer know who to trust. The alarm clock goes off. You don't even remember setting an alarm clock. Everything is out of your control. Your heart's racing, your pulse pounding. You can put your finger, you can't put your finger on it, but you know something is wrong. Something is terribly, terrifyingly wrong. You're not safe. You will never be safe ever again. The world is a cruel, vicious, unrelentingly ruthless place, and you're its latest victim. It's driving you mad. You're afraid to go out. Even the daylight is filled with shadows in your mind. You're losing your mind. Any moment it may pounce, whatever the fuck it is, and you're not ready for this. You're just not ready for this. People look at you and they know you're afraid, and the fear is contagious. You know they feel it too. No matter their friendly waves and their trimmed rose bushes, you're all in this together, because everybody knows that evil's on the prowl. And evil does not negotiate. You cannot reason with evil. Not even God can reason with the devil, and only death can save you. But first the horror must come. Blood must be spilled. You pray it will not be yours, but you know there's no escaping it. Nobody can help you now. Don't you just love a good horror movie? Angst and dread abounding. But we call it suspense. A lot of people pay a lot of good money to keep themselves suspended. Day 2. Captain Fantastic. Is there life on Netflix? Civilized savagery and savage incivility. Goodbye, bienvenus, and hello, Cheerios. It's all quietly chirpy in the forest glade. A deer peacefully munching on whatever deer munch on. Suddenly distracted, hears something or smells something. We don't, but the deer does, or feels a presence. He's no fool, he's a deer. Something unfamiliar in close vicinity, too close for comfort. A deer in the headlights. Something really savage this way comes, leaps out from the bushes with a large hunting knife, grabs that deer by the neck and slits its throat. A mud-caked face with the hunting stripes, a young boy. His first kill. The mud-caked family gather round. The father, proud, tells him he is now a man, a living, breathing, natural man, intimately in tune with his food source. That night they feast heartily around a blazing fire, play their own music, dance their own dances. Life is good and being well taken care of, and a healthier bunch of Brady's not even Walt Disney could imagine, and quirky cute, so quirky, quirky, and smart, in the old school sense, book learned. They could recite the Bill of Rights, the Gettysburg Address, and Noam Chomsky verbatim with times and dates in the weather report and all the skills they need to survive in the wild with only a hunting knife. They could spark flints, scale scarps, and navigate by the stars. Self-responsibility for problem solving at a premium, dialogue and open debate to consensus, a family given, homeschooling at its finest. But something is missing. Somebody's missing. The mother, the martyr familias. And there's the rub that rankles their idyll, so to speak, as the backstory unfolds. They're no natives to this existence. It's a chosen retreat from corrupted modernity, inspired by the mother's bipolar disorder, in search of a less unnatural cure, which apparently didn't work. So she's retreated back to corrupted modernity, but apparently that didn't work either. She's committed suicide. How did they learn this? I can't remember. Bush Telegraph, or maybe got a P.O. box at the nearest trading post. So the overwhelming question becomes, should they attend the funeral? Some of the young kids who never experienced corruption. The father, hesitant but emotive-driven consensus, demands they have no choice but to enter the devil's corrupted playground. Somewhere in Minnesota, I think. Fair enough. We have conflict. We have narrative. And we have Viggo Mortensen as the wildly unshaven part of shaman and Nali, biologically elected Captain Fantastic. He gathers his merry pranksters into the RV. Obviously, he was not always so primitive. All dressed like they're belatedly off to discover Woodstock, invade the Capitol building, or they got a gig in Disneyland's Frontier Park. Some comic sequences. There's this backwards Brady Punch who'd refuse to leave anything to Beaver but what is Beaver's. Transition into a ketchup, Coke, and more politely landscaped civilization of rigorously varnished truths, virtual realities, and smartphones. They march into the church like the Dalton Gang on LSD, Viggo interrupting the service with some unvarnished truth-telling straight from the hip. But the wife's father is not one to hide behind a rain barrel in some blind alley to avoid the big showdown. This is his town. It's his daughter, and it's his right to determine her passage into the sunset. Some chest-beating, culture-clashing till Viggo realizes he's outnumbered. The family retreats, but only to plan a midnight raid. They exhume the body, cremate it on a pagan pyre, then, as per his wife, their mother's wishes, whimsically bipolarized or not, they sanctify her ashes by sacrilegiously flushing them down a toilet. But the die is cast. The kids have seen Gay Paris. The eldest son reveals to his father he's already been accepted by every Ivy League university his mother had surreptitiously guided him to apply to. Maybe his Maoist convictions tipped the scales. He'd studied every ism there is. Noam Chomsky, just the tip of his studious iceberg. As for the younger kids, all manner of perms and permutations in their offing, and their straight-laced grandparents, all lovingly playful and well-heeled enough to provide the funding. Who knows? One day, one of them could become president in the land of the free and the fumigated, hot showers and microwave ovens. The eldest shaves off his savage locks and heads off to Harvard, and we finalize the single-parent family, ensconced in a neat but modest suburban home, a casually but unprovocatively attired, clean-shaven Viggo resignedly presiding over an unself-slaughtered breakfast as they await the big yellow school bus to ferry the kids off for further re-education. We're going to take you on a journey. Judge not, lest you be judging your own relationship to civilized realities. Day 3. Living Independence, Part 1. Come with me to the Casbah. Just don't ask why. If you have to ask, hey, there's only one answer. And it's in our database. Consensus, trance. Herd mentality, herd immunity. to any probing thoughts not already confirmed by some laconic, well, everybody knows that. And any somebodies who don't know that, as some wholesale given, is obviously not keeping up with the times out of that, or they just don't know what they're talking about. They've been keeping up with the wrong news. They've been disinformed, should at best be humoured, at worst demonised as some dangerously subversive wacko who could be a potential terrorist, needs to be silenced in case anybody starts taking them seriously. This is the state the state has brought us to. We need to be all in this together. And if you disagree, you're obviously not in it with us. Even in the land of individual enterprise, prized for its idiosyncratic initiatives. So many died in the battle for independence. The individual, now earmarked as Johnny Reb, enemy of the Union, must be a legacy slave owner or a bigot or a hate criminal or a right-wing ideologically warped radical extremist or a walking tautology, if that's the word for it. As soon as an institution calls for an independent inquiry into allegations of in-house corruption, a modest research so often uncovers very direct links of that independent body to that same institution which is in-house inquiring into itself, and very often coming back with a no-fault verdict, or at best a couple of high-level patsies willing to fall on the metaphorical sword, maybe a few years in low-level incarceration in return for a handsome payoff or a promise of a less high-profile sequestration to another department affiliate, as the too-big-to-fail institution itself carries on business as usual thanks to that independent inquiry. The government has a definite tendency towards independently investigating itself. Hey, a few bad apples doesn't mean the tree's gone rotten at its roots. Checks and balances prevail. Freedom of information, transparency by the national security redactions, of course. We're just here to keep you safe because there's some real horror movies going on out there. We've told you often enough, you've watched them enough. We're all independently in this together. If you can't depend on your own government, who can you depend on independently? No man is an island. But at what point does the individual become an occupied territory, especially with the global 24/7 media raining down on us, and especially when that media is in the hands of such a limitedly incorporated few? Don't you just love a good conspiracy movie? A man discovering the government is a for-profit corporation. He never knew that. Never crossed his mind. The military, the police force, the courts of justice, the Federal Reserve, all signature contract-driven corporations. Maybe the uniforms that they give away, even if it's just a suit and tie, officers of the corporation at work here under statute law, maritime law, not the law of the land, were contracted property of so many corporations, obviously involved in some global merger. Is it any wonder we're only protected if we're useful and profitable? A modest amount of research, but have you got it in you? Or have you got trendier things to be getting on with? Fashioning a new identity on Facebook. It's the clothes and the haircut make that the man, women, or whatever you'd like to become, and seem to have become a la carte, a la mode. No longer come as you are, come as you prefer to be. Apparently, biology is up for grabs, and love, well, all you need is the right match with the right one. Sex will be out of this world. You'll be having orgasms from 6 feet apart, just knowing you finally found your one true mate. Nothing to do with procreation, it's all in the DNA. Beyond gender, race, creed, or common sense. You want common sense, may as well just love your neighbour. It's all in our database. Could be a lesbian from Tanganyika or a trucker from Wichita Falls. You'll know it when you feel it. There's a right one for everyone. What could go wrong with that? Of course, you may have to leave your current spouse and kids, but what choice do you have if it's in the database? Cuts through all that awkward romantic doubt and bullshit. Of course, if your lesbian from Tanganyika gets fatally hit by a trucker from Wichita Falls while orgasming on Skype, you're either up Schitt's Creek or you realise all this time you've just been in love with yourself. So you'll be perfectly happy living alone for the rest of your life. I mean, sex is such an ugly business unless it's just for pleasure, and we do have a database for that. No lingering dysfunctional baggage. You are in truth your one and only. You can sign up yourself if you like. We do have a waiting list. No prophylactics necessary. That's already been dealt with. So drink your martini, take your meds, and we'll take care of everything. It's all perfectly legal. May not be lawful, but it's legal. We should know we made the fucking law. Who are we? First base. Did you know? Did you know legal doesn't mean it has to be lawful? There's a whole independent world of difference. Could explain a lot of things. Could confuse a lot of people. I'm sure it's clear enough to the CEOs, or maybe not, depends how high up they are on the corporate ladder. It's what decent democratic capitalists call private property. Profit initiative or bottom line feeding. Don't knock it just because you've not been fed enough. Day 4. Tangled up in news and fake suppositories. Thoughts on some windy changes. But the BBC is a self-proclaimed corporation. Though, in my mind, growing up, inextricably the governing voice of what was really going on in the country and the world, defiantly non-commercial, unless you count advertising the government and the royal family and the noble history of Great Britain. Well, hell of a merchandising pitch. Everything you need to know and celebrate how the world got to be as it is. All on the BBC, the people's champion of truth and light entertainment, which is why the people needed to support it with a mandated licence tax. To have a TV and not pay that tax is a criminal offence. You could be getting a knock on the door any moment, and you'd assume it was the government coming after you, not just some tawdry debt collector. It's the BBC holds the United Kingdom together and the Commonwealth. And if you're proud of being British, you'd be watching the BBC to confirm it. Civility, articulacy, production value, and professionalism guaranteed. If you were ashamed of being British, you'd be down the pub getting shit-faced, swearing a lot and dreaming of the Queen naked, spread-eagled and handcuffed to the bedpost. So if you don't want to be squalidly ashamed of yourself all your life, you really need to watch Panorama and keep in touch with the bigger picture. BBC's World News. We didn't become a global empire for nothing. You ought to see what some of these places looked like before we turned up, how these people lived. Makes Coronation Street look like Park Avenue and the local pub like Buckingham Palace. Check in with the new David Attenborough series. How we brought nature into your living room and kept it there. We brought you modern civilization. We brought you the BBC. Of course, we're using the royal. We are copywriters, devoted monarchists and avid viewers of masterpiece to masterpiece. Even if we're Americans, we can keep up with it on BritBox. I had a friend once. More of an acquaintance, friend of a friend. Devout socialist Geordie, bordering on communist. Hated royalty with a passion, once proclaimed it very loudly in a local pub, and that the royal family should be strung up with chicken wire. Almost came to blows with the landlord and several patrons. He was soundly ejected and banned from any future pints in that establishment. Of course, later he joined the Royal Shakespeare Company, and apparently all was forgotten, forgiven as some youthfully wrong-minded bravado. The rewards of royalty can right so much wrong-mindedness. He works for the BBC now, and the BBC beatings go on. Who pays the piper calls the tune. These days, the royals seem quite content to play a supporting role to its new surrogate royalty, Bill Gates, who can afford promotional, unchallenged airtime, would make an unsweating Prince Andrew blush. Familiarly called the firm by all those who wish to be familiar with it, firmly guided us through 2 world wars and a Suez crisis. Of course, it also helped us get into 2 world wars and a Suez crisis. The pyramidal hierarchy manifest, the standard bearer, nothing independent about the BBC. It's a PR spin doctor propaganda arm of the established incorporated octopus. If you don't see the world through their eyes, you obviously need cataract surgery. As a bona fide inheritor of glaucoma, I could possibly claim that as a default position should I ever be hauled up before Boris Johnson as an enemy of the established state of mind. Though I reside legally in the US, I still have my British passport, which I renewed at considerable expense not long before it became imminently possible I might need to update it with my health and vaccination status should I decide to revisit the old sod. Never imagined I'd need a shot in the arm to visit my homeland that used to be reserved for less civilized, more savage destinations. But now we're all in this together. Additional proof not only of my existence, but how I choose to express my existence, which may be mandated to make sure I'm making the right choices. As soon as you unquestioningly allow somebody to decide what's right and wrong, you've already forfeited your common sense. If being human, not animal, has any speciality at all, it's knowing right from wrong, having a conscience to distinguish, a basic integrity to know when you fucked up and learn from it and not bury it. This is undoubtedly what such as Catholic confession is all about. It gets very complicated and confusing in human society, which all too often can reward you for doing something wrong and seems to encourage you to do more of it. Cheats never beat was a common enough phrase when I was a kid, but apparently malpractice can be indemnified. Some people can get away with murder, especially with some shared profit in it. The Commonwealth at work. I had another friend once when I lived in London. He was a lawyer. I went to see him once at work in the courts of justice. Hardly a high-profile case, but he won it. But I knew he was lying. He told me he was lying. But so was the opposition. The judge knew this, he said. Just a judge done the most convincing lie. So it was quite appropriate to cheat. Maybe the one thing I learned from that, I could never be a fucking lawyer. If I needed to lie, I needed to make it very clear. It's a fiction, Your Honour. I'm making it up for your entertainment. Otherwise, I'd never get to heaven, which, the older I get, seems less and less of a metaphor. Have to meet my maker with a clear conscience. Could never be a politician either. At some point, you'd know you have to make promises you strongly suspect you may not be able to keep. You'd have to start assuming everybody knows that really is politics. Anybody with any common sense, anyway, like trusting a salesman who comes after you, doesn't wait for you to turn up at the corner shop because you really need something he might have. This culture is drowning in sales pitches and promises that can't be kept. Who made you? Who made somebody else the arbiter of what I really need to live in this world? I mean, if I can't wake up in the morning and know what I'm missing, would you buy a used car or a brand new life from this man? If I can't find it for myself, it must mean I don't really need it. Day 5. Living Independence, Part 2. My life online, enthralled by the invisible. Any medium would tell you that. Don't you know it's the end of the rainbow? And you're the pot of gold? Oh, you're the crock of shit. You decide. Skeeter and Judy can't help you now. Only connect. For a long time, I avoided the media altogether. It's a bit like raw juice fasting or just avoiding junk food, alcohol, drugs or caffeine. Does help clear your body and your mind out to focus independently on what yourself thinks and feels, likes and dislikes about your life, your world, and your needs to sanely sustain yourself and best flourish in it. Any other ideas and inspirations would have to come out of some livingly present horse's mouth. It was having kids pull me back into the mediated world, at first with movies, as I still avoided commercialism and politics like poison. They both worked along the same lines as somebody trying to sell you something they needed you to buy into. As the kids grew older and I grew somewhat reluctantly remotorized, I began listening to the car radio to ease the chores of driving them to one activity or another. I was guided by a friend of National Public Radio as a non-commercialized option. Though generous donations from Dunkin' Donuts and other corporate entities did keep cropping up, albeit less infantilizingly jingle-pitched till I realized NPR was affiliated to the BBC, and by such association, far from independent of global, officially narrative underpinnings. So I switched to a local station I had grounded visitation rights to and several personal connections. By the station man, it was volunteer man, listener supported and strewn with independently personal aptitudes, tastes and opinions, and it's been my soul car radio of choice ever since. Beyond that, as the real world compelled me to transact so much my official business on paperless automated line, I was pulled into the computer, and by default curiosity pulled me into the mediated world of independent podcasts on audio. So I could lie back, close my eyes, no screen intermediation between me and somebody's voice. In lieu of live in-personness has always been my preferred mode of communication. No trappings of production value, charming or disturbing body or facial tics, no photogenic spell to cast or unphotogenic bias to inflict. I can listen to anybody as long as I believe they believe what they say, and they're speaking in their own voice from their own mind, and I feel there's a heart and soul humanity at work and play. I can readily agree to listen no matter any content I may disagree with. Personal conviction can trump even cliche, or undermine and expose it if you recognise that voice is faltering into co-opted brainwash or rote recitation. Only I can decide what rings true for me. My personal responsibility to be discriminate, even though these days you may be criminalised as a hate thinker and too selfish for the world's good. Though with no power to do more than switch channels, you think I could be judged mitigating circumstances. No harm done, 10 hours of community service, case dismissed. But no more walks in the park unless it's absolutely essential and you're wearing a mask. Otherwise, you might be arrested and handcuffed for violating the Nuremberg Code, experimenting on yourself without your own informed consent. In this post-fact world, beliefs are up for grabs. Some people always have to be sacrificed. It may just be the sparkle in someone's eyes, so it could be contact lenses, so photogenically blinding you to the possibility they might be lying. But why? Why would they do that? Even if they are wearing contact lenses. And why would they be on TV if they were not more in touch with the real world than you are? Think that through may give you an insight into mass hypnosis. He's just a nerd with a disarming chuckle, and so calm under the pressure of telling you you may have to die, but it's for the good of the world. Some people always have to be sacrificed. I just told you that. This thing is bigger than both of us. And all together, we're all in it. We need to build back better. People die every day. It's no big deal. You'll be here on the front line in my book. Disarming up chuckle, I've been accused. I have been accused of being cynical. Usually by people I think are not skeptical enough. As far as I'm concerned, you can only be cynical if you don't think life's worth living. If you think your life is worth living, I think you need to be skeptical of anybody who's telling you how you need to live it. The rulers of the airwaves now account any media as independent, which it appears to rattle the cage, so long as it accepts to stay in the cage. The implication being that the jailers hold the keys only to keep you safe from the chaos outside. Chaos having become a blanket explanation for eliminating any rattlesnakes who think they should have their own key. It's for your own good. Who's producing the show? He's on first base. Every now and then these benevolent Democrats allow you to vote on it. Though if the numbers don't turn up in their favour, they'll put the judgment in hold till they convince you made a serious mistake. Need to think through all that independent thought again. How much more efficient and expedient, a lot less expensive and time-consuming if we just rig the thing to get the right results according to our expert advisors, who wouldn't be making thousands of dollars an hour if they were not experts. Stands to reason. Rationale, another word that rarely withstands independent, evidence-based scrutiny. Who needs evidence when you can manipulate consent? Keep the general populace in that consensual trance. Everybody knows what the facts are. We've told you often enough. If you can see the signs all over the place, if you have to ask, and everybody else is accepting it, what's your fucking problem? Aren't we all in this together? Don't you just love a good political thriller? And it's a blessing you can just turn it off if it gets too political or just not thrilling enough. Switch to Judge Judy or some professorial treatise on the mud puzzles of ancient Mesopotamia, or that hot new sitcom, adults behaving like childish idiots. To each their own, I guess, if it makes you laugh. So long as you're not just laughing along with the laugh track, subliminal jollity, men talking about being women, women talking about being men, persons talking about being somebody different every day, and how refreshingly diverse it is, infinite varieties of biological interpretation, and the vast possibilities of never having to decide who or what you really are. Hey, whatever floats your fucking boat, as the technological tides of virtuosity turn the world into a mysterium wash of anything goes till it's virtually gone. All this radiant stuff hovering in your airwaves at the same time, 24/7. You don't have to be seeing it to be feeling it, not seeing it. That's the beauty of being smart. You need never allow yourself to be turned off. You'd be watching season 46 of How to Traffic Underage Girls without ever having to tie them up, and at the same time dreaming in Oprah Winfrey probing moments, because she can really get to the bottom of anything. White supremacy has many colours. The Chinese are just one of them. The Russians, well, they're not white, they're just fucking Russians. Americans, well, land of the Cree, home of the Navajo, a thing of shreds and Apaches, red-faced minstrels reduced to singing Mammy's got a brand new shopping bag. All the world's a page that got torn out from the original edition. So let's hear it for the Cleveland interlopers. We seem to have lost the last half of the third quarter. I think we need a time out, as the pig said to the bacon sandwich, from our past. We learn our future, as the chicken said to the egg. You'd look familiar if you weren't so scrambled, as the tomato said to the ketchup. Squeeze me, and will I not bleed, as the aspirin said to the herbal supplement. Time can't change me, but I can put Rosemary's Headache on the back burner for a while, or was it the other way around? No time to spare. In this region of mugworts, it makes no fucking sense. Who doesn't? He's on second base. As the beatings go on within you, or without you, in the immortal words of the late great Beatle George Harrison, or did he riff that off from Sonny and Cher? Copyright's at stake. But the steak was burned to a crisp on the barbecue. Nothing left to stick through Dracula's heart. The vampire's on the loose. Stick your neck out at your own risk. Peter Noon is among us. That bastard spawn of Herman's Munster. That great gothic faux gorgonzola who can stink to high heaven and taste like the rotting flesh of a young blessed virgin at the same time. He'll suck your blood out and tell you got a cholesterol problem. You need medication, or you may never eat yourself again, as the white corpuscle said to the red corpuscle. It's more of a racial problem. Best we sort it out by proxy. Who's the judge? He's the pretty picture. I am offending you. Am I offending? Are you offending me? Who is being the most offensive? Shortstop. Let the people vote on it. He hasn't had a home run since he left the womb. Whose womb? First base. It's his nom de plume. I have to do this. I guess I have to do this every now and then. It unclutters my brain. It keeps my mind open, only connects. E.M. Forster, A Passage to India, Love's Body, Norman O'Brown, James Joyce, Finnegan's Wake, On the Road and Off to Get Boozed Up at his mum's house for the rest of his life, Jack Kerouac, Connecting the Scatological Dots, Moonlight in Vermont, Ella Fitzgerald, maybe not, but the scat has to scan. Where's a good fucking Satchmo when you need one? Somebody not all bottled up and labelled fragile. A 4-word poem. Another 4-word poem. A poem with 5 words. I could write 1,000,000 billion poems, as many words as you wish, more poems and words than you ever dreamed of or ever deemed necessary. The prospect is frightening, but it's simply a fact. One of 1,000,000 billion facts you never dreamed of nor deemed necessary. It's simply a fact, a 4-word fact, another 4-word fact. The prospect is frightening. Don't you just love a good horror poem, or even verse? The ancient mariner, Garot's the highwayman, thinks he got away with it till the raven comes a knocking. Oh, was it the ghosts of Cathy looking for Heathcliff? But now we've got old prose fiction. You know, I've often been told I talk too fast and too much. I've never been accused of talking too little or too slow. I have been accused of not making sense and communicating badly. Some people can very clearly communicate lack of understanding. You can know exactly what they're saying and still not know what the fuck they're talking about. To each their own way of relieving the clutter from their mind, or adding to it if they can't find the right rhythm and the melody's all wrong and they're mistaking opportunities as mistakes. That's just not jazz, man. Some people seem happier just to listen. Checks and balances. Sometimes I just love to listen, even to people who are not making sense, so long as they're not insisting I understand what they're talking about and act on it as if I should. I used to live with a Welsh couple. Sounded like they were taking vowels and consonants and vocalizing Jackson Pollock. It was a lesson in creative listening. So long as you know they're not faking it. Linguistic diversity, it's a gift if you're not just asking directions to the nearest emergency restroom. I was invited once to participate in a storytelling event. I had to audition a story. I was told I'm on one to go slower and emphasize the bullet points. I told him more in body language than words. I think I need to shoot from the hip, aiming at anything that seems to be getting in my way. I've got things to do, places to be, no time to reload. Once you're going, you have to keep going. But I never start anything I know I can't finish. Nothing ends but everything. Or is it the other way around? Only connect one node to another node. We need to see where the nodes are leading, to node exit or to one really big node you never knowed possible, till your own little node explodes right in front of your face. Sneeze that shakes your world, rattles your walls, and you're left noding you didn't really know the damn thing at all. Little node pain, big node gain. Who would ever have known? He's the umpire. Ask him, so long as he's not faking it. Day 6. Day 6. My horoscope. If you use your time well, and your energy efficiently, people will know you're not someone to trifle with. Opportunity doesn't always knock on your door. Any analysis not acted upon is but the mirage of a waterfall in the middle of a desert, Sahara or Gobi. At some point, you have to decide and act upon that decision with quiet persistence. Be like the oyster crafting a pearl from sand. Consider joining a symphony orchestra or a church choir. It'll help you blend in. Ignore all those who compete with you from the sidelines. Always cherry pick and never obsess over an obsession. Update all your prescriptions, develop communication skills, and let go of anything that doesn't offer you any wiggle room. Never wear suits that too closely match the wallpaper. And remember, humor is not an option. It is a requirement. Day 7. Is there anybody left outside who would like to come in? Drinks are on the house. But what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens in time remains temporary. What does it mean? What does it mean to be human? In a natural world not designed for overzealously inhuman interference, deeming a natural immune system unfit for purpose, needs to be transplanted by an artificial surrogate who will need regular upgrades, a sound business model to ensure lifetime customers. So you can budget ahead and definitely pay off your mortgage. Nano chips in the brain so you'll never have to ask yourself any awkward questions like, why am I alive, Alexa? Why am I alive? That's a good question. Is there anything else I can give you an answer for? What is the French underground? It was a submerged system for transporting French people. Now, of course, they prefer to stay home. It's much safer and saves valuable time. What is time? It's 10 o'clock. It's also an ancient herbal remedy for tempering bad odors. The current gurus of this world would have us believe humanity is a flowering of unnatural speciality, capable of artifice beyond the mere animalistic, manufacturing its own gifts, defying all nature's failings to a perfection of its own design, recreating creation to its own specifications, the gardeners of its own world. weeding, pruning, seeding, harvesting only most hardy, sightly, and useful of crops. If there is a God, wouldn't God approve? And unless he is truly a very jealous, wrathful, and possessive God, in which case he doesn't deserve his omniscient righteousness if he knew not what he had actually wrought. I watched America's president give his first and very belated press conference to an amassed presence of 7 masked, utterly ruling media mongers sitting 6 feet apart. And it confirmed that the free world's gone fucking demented if Joe Biden is the leader of it. I mean, it was like watching somebody die again at their own funeral. He could barely answer questions, even though they'd obviously been renowned for it. Masterfully comic, if you believed he was trying to be funny. Those deadpan stares into a rapidly evacuating wilderness. Hard to believe he's not just working through his pension fund. And before long, he will be passing on the reins of power to a relatively unknown, much younger actress, more able to learn all the lines and follow the plot line to a more vigorous finale. Has to be a career maker. Might even win her an Oscar as Best Supporting Player in an ensemble production whose guiding lights prefer to remain in the dark. Leave lesser egos for the gossip columnists to chew over. They got bigger fish to fry. You'd think people could hear and smell the sizzling by now. Something's gonna go up in smoke, and it won't be for the faint-hearted. But let's not get too melodramatic. It's just a fucking movie. Don't you just love a good end of humanity as we once knew it blockbuster? Politics in Hollywood. Like whiskey and soda, money laundering, and endless sequels that bomb at the box office. Like all's fair in war, and love doesn't come into it, really. Like hating to do what you have to do, but learning to love that you have to do it. Like entertaining the folks and revising their history at the same time. Like predicting the future and make it happen a few months later. Like Sergeant York, Gary Cooper, sweeping the red carpet a few months before World War II. Are you a hero? Or a coward, a pussy, or a patriot? Best years of their lives swamping It's a Wonderful Life into zero award perspective. Are you a dreamer or an actor? A cynic or a benevolent banker? A gentleman's agreement highlighting anti-Semitism a few months before recognition of the new state of Israel? Are you a hate-mongering bigot or an unconscientious non-objector? A blockbuster Pearl Harbor a few months before 9/11? Coincidence or correlation? Are you a victim of propaganda or a master of law and order and righteous indignation? Personal integrity, family and moral values trumped by collective duty. Personal tragedy by banking initiatives. Genocidal terrorist activities masked by political correctness. Truth on the ground by appearances on the surface. Common sense trumped by psychological operations that forthright and immodest. Dearth of research. I don't care if the sun don't shine. I get me loving on the evening time. On CNN, Netflix, or the BBC, streaming up the Amazon, doggy paddling down the Prime. Don't you just love a good documentary confirming what you've already suspected? Day 8, Steam Control, The Morning Show. I watched this series on Netflix. Within a couple of episodes, I knew where it was going, so I skipped to the finale. And there it was, passionately and highly professionally being framed. Apparently based on a real-world event, the exposure of male sexual malfeasance behind the scenes of a primetime TV network news show. The heroically re-empowered darling of the national airways finally telling the truth to the world. Think network, Peter Finch. I am not going to take it anymore, because these shows are super ego grounded on believing the whole fucking world's watching. They tell us often enough at risk of her career. All that fakery is finally infused and disaffected her soul. We must not remain silent, fair enough. The guilty male offenders are brought to justice, or at least to heel and public scorn, and women should be accountable for not reporting this in the first place. Of course, some of them did, but they were either ignored, fired, or promoted to keep them quiet. No more. No, Ma, I'm not taking this anymore. Female empowerment, toxic masculinity, toxic TV journalism exposed and redeemed at the same time. It's what Tom Wolfe used to call steam control, to keep reality from exploding its framework altogether. Day 9. Fallen angels and hairy apes. Have you ever considered they've been recreating us in their own image for many, many years? Just not as smart. It makes sense. If you want to be the masters, not the slaves, the employers, not the employees, I mean, they being those demigods, fallen angels, Nephilim, Anunnaki, call them what you like. Somebody has been adapting us to suit their needs for the past several thousand years. It's documented in ancient scriptures and hieroglyphics, shamanistically confirmed throughout the world, blurring the lines between history and myth. Apparently, they were fleeing some star wars they were losing, needed to lay low for a while, to replenish their resources and recover some technological parity before going back into cosmic battle, needed a compliant labor force, and thus was born the genetically modified two-legged humanoid, part Anunnaki, part hairy ape. First batch worked well enough for a while, but they were just not dumb enough to take slavery lying down. Few too many Anunnaki brain cells left in there, re-sparking natural impulses. They said, sod this for a lot, and went off to build their own pyramids. Didn't even look like pyramids anymore. So these demigods had to go back to the drawing board many times, apparently. Lot of precedents for what's happening now. Just more regionally targeted lessons to be learned, trial and error, different strokes for different folks, different jabs for different labs. These humanoids were a stubborn bunch, still too natural for their own good, and that lingering Anunnaki brain cell always giving them a heads up. But these Nephilitics knew there would come a time they'd have to go for broke. Maybe their cosmic opposition had got wind of their whereabouts. They needed to take down the whole humanoid race in one technologically tailored blow, eradicate all natural impulses and genetically modify that lingering brain cell so it doesn't know if it's coming or if it's already been and gone. There's nothing in there but such fear, distress, confusion and chaos. They'll take orders from anybody who seems to have a plan, and there'll be nobody else around, natural or smart enough, to give them a heads up, even if there is. There's nowhere left on the planet to escape to. We know exactly where you live. It's comply or die. Euphemistic politesse out the fucking window. Your choice. No skin of our nephilitic noses. It's a thought. It's a thought for a two-legged genetically modified humanoid evening under the stars. This thing is bigger than all of us in it together. Do we have a choice? Do they have a choice? Is that what Mick Jagger was sympathizing with? Let's face it. Apart from nature itself, nobody's doing what just comes naturally anymore. Day 10. A murdering of Mormons, fraudulently breaking faith. There was this Mormon who was born a Mormon, raised a Mormon, missionized for the Mormons. Nobody ever would have thought or said he was anything but a devout Mormon. Little did they know. This Mormon had other faiths to fry. He was a double agent, worked alone, James Bond on tranquilizers, a quiet, soft-spoken nerd, but a Mormon nonetheless. So no Mormon held that against him. He was a treasure hunter. Indiana Jones pre-MK Ultra didn't bring out the Cool Whip in him, but it did bring out the homemade bombs, a silent spring until the boom, boom, boom. Two Mormons dead. Two Mormons dead, and himself critically wounded. But was that an accident? An attempt at suicide, or a fiendishly courageous distraction from himself being a murder suspect in a plea deal tell-all interview later to save himself from the death penalty? He didn't seem so sure himself. I mean, with 3 bombs in your car and undecided who the next victim should be, he who hesitates may get fucking blown up. He was a faker. At first, for childish delight, he'd lead his friends out on treasure hunts, treasure that he himself would always find, eureka, 'cause he knew exactly where it was. He planted it there the previous night. But then, for money, He built a career seeking out Holy Grail Mormon documents from the church's earliest history. If he couldn't find it, he'd invent it. He was a forger. Became a highly skilled forger. Could fool the most practiced authenticators. When he was found out, he was called a genius, so he himself dismissed this as fools not wanting to appear fooled by some average, quiet, soft-spoken nerd who had finally bitten off more than he could chew. It's a time-consuming, laborious business, forging documents, and eventually he started making promises he couldn't keep. He'd taken money up front for his latest bombshell discovery, exposing the Latter-day Saints as a fraudulent faith, more black magic, pagan, heretic, serpent sorcery than divinely angelic inspiration. Priceless. But he put a price on it. Apparently all his previous ill-gotten gains he'd spent on fast cars and non-Mormon-esque whiskey-swilling business junkets. His family was in financial peril. He was a broken man, in meltdown, a desperate man who decided somebody had to die. It was the only way through this. It was his only way. A man got to do what a man got to do. I mean, he put the fear of God, a false God, into the halls of Mormon Montezuma, and all else would be forgiven or forgotten. Living all your life in fakery can take its toll. Could turn you into a homicidal fucking nutjob. Turned out his strict, joyless Mormon upbringing had given him nothing but contempt for the faith. Liars and hypocrites at its highest level. And if he couldn't find the proof he'd invented, that'll put the cat among the pigeons. For a time there was a lingering stench of Mormon cover-up of Berkshire to keep the document from public view. But a couple of cops and a crack forensic team would not be fooled. They had their own suspicions, and despite the Salt Lake community's general consensus that no way it was this quiet, soft-spoken, devoutly Mormon family man nerd involved in this, the cops finally proved their point. The mystery solved. Justice served and fakery incarcerated, thank the Mormon God. But the fact he could have gotten away with this for so long just makes you wonder. And a lot of people still do. How many people are out there pretending to be somebody they're not, apparently believing something they don't, and selling it to you on the open market as a final solution to closing your circuit? Faking it. It's common parlance in show business. Ultimate artifice in the professionalism of regular public performance. To make the meticulously rehearsed appear unrehearsed, the highest accolade of your craft. A select few can occasionally turn it into an art, but it's the artifice that crafts you a career. Having to remain on such arbitrary deadlines, professionalism at its finest. When it never crosses your audience's mind that you might be faking it. Your house just burned to the ground, both your parents killed in a car crash, but the show must go on. Fair enough, in poetic fiction. But when somebody is bringing you the news from the real world, and they're faking it, can get problematic, could give you a perception of reality that's only as real as whoever is telling you it, whoever's on the fucking payroll of whoever is producing it. As soon as you put reality into a frame, you're already hanging yourself in somebody else's museum, which is only an art gallery when you raise or lower the stakes on what can be framed, and thus taken out of any fuller context, like why certain things are so professionally framed and so many other things dumped into the fucking trash bin of general worthlessness, the arbiters of taste, or their version of what reality should or shouldn't be. Day 11. Nights as the long knives, enthralled by the visible. A variety show of unending variance that should spark your interest, forever waving to the drowning crowds. Impersonations of a mimic, everything to gain and nothing to laugh about. Just another deer in the headlights. And God said, "Why can't you just write a fucking simple, straightforward story of life as it goes on from day to day?" And the devil said, "Get a life, God, get a life. There are no days in eternity, just one perpetual night of the long knives. I'm cutting out the middlemen and women. Can't tell the difference anymore. I've stolen their eggs, blunted their sperm, bred a whole new breed of inconsequentials to service their remaker. Fair enough, they served their purpose. Who were they to judge what that was? Can you splice a stem cell? No? Well, there we are then. When the natural immune system is being attacked and undermined by unnatural forces that consider themselves too big to fail. When anybody and everybody can just sit down at a keyboard, press a switch, push a few buttons and assume the genius of Bach. Shouldn't we suspect the art of living has turned a transformative corner from which there may be no turning back into a living, breathing human? You'd just be faking it. When 99% of humanity is equally dependent on special effects, you were never that special anyway. No matter how much genius you could simulate, we have achieved wuthering heights. We're either doomed by love or saved by the ghost of it, breeding lilacs out of a dead land, or at least comatose. If the average faker can appear godlike in their own little one-up, low-down, no-up, really one-size-fits-all, what do you think the above-average fakers are up to in their mansioned estates and mega-research facilities, casting spells to keep us convinced that the world is on the right track, one step to the side? Danger, train thunder. If you can train thunder, you can certainly train a raindrop. Danger, Will Robinson, danger, fear. You will be afraid. You will be very afraid. Truth is stranger than fiction, but we need the fiction to convince us that and keep us at arm's length in plain sight. They live, if you're seeing through the right prescription glasses, behind every billboard and sign, a secret message. You are fucked. You're being fooled. Lambs to the slaughter, sheep sleepwalking into the fold. If you think we're all in this together, you're living in a dream or a John Carpenter movie, but let's not get too cinematically bamboozled. Normal service will be resumed as soon as they've renormalized it. Meanwhile, lock all your doors. Bar all your windows, pull the sheets over your head. Don't take that rag away from your face. This ain't the time for breathing properly. You need to hold your breath and trust us. You might not need it at all later. When Adam and Eve ate that apple, did it drive them mad? The serpent didn't tell them there was a toxic worm in all that knowledge. We've been intoxicated with it ever since. Take me to your leader. Multiply coloured, many-gendered, all angles accounted for, unsex me, and let me murder like a man, not some villain harmonically passable heat, cold-blooded, decisive, and utterly consequential, a tyrant of my own passions and everybody else's too, a pox on your uncertainty. It's the only way forward into the nights of daylight. I shall be my own father figure, and sire a whole brood of codlings. Don't you just love a bloody good tragedy? All but biblical. It's the greatest story never told to anybody but the bloodiest initiated. He or she who hesitates may have lost their train of thought, or just be firing up a whole new engine. In many ways, we've been colluding with tyranny since we opened our first bank account and felt like somebody was doing us a favour by taking care of all our money for us. Or since we first pledged allegiance, sang God Save the Queen, or Stars and Stripes Forever, paid our first taxes, ordered our first McDonald's hamburger, took out health insurance, credited out our first TV, computer or smartphone, bought into the system, accepted our systematically awarded rewards and social identity as our primary connection to the real world, stopped growing our own food, stopped cooking our own food, making our own clothes, building our own houses, manufacturing our own tools, eating bananas and apples and other exotic foods delivered to us from far off places up the Amazon. Any civilization that can't take care of its own needs is bound to be assimilated by a larger one that promises to take care of everything. We chose to go global. We chose to be governed, and governed we will be. And the globe is a very big place, takes a lot of governing. History taught us there are lots of governments to choose from. The human race has never all been governed by the same government at the same time. There are many, many ways to govern, with an iron fist or a democratic glove, wishing to feel our voice would be heard. Of course, we choose chose the democratic club, or at least we thought we did. But things change, governments change. We were taught that too. Absolute monarchy 1 minute, Bolshevik communist the next, republic 1 minute, fascist dictatorship the next, often with various blendings in transition. If we were taught that ours was the best of all possible governments, we could be in for a great global awakening. Nothing is what it seems to be, especially without critical thinking. Never let a crisis go to waste. In an emergency, things can change very, very quickly. Maybe we were never taught that governments may not be what we think they are. Weak monarchs were ruled by backroom expert advisors. Dictatorships run by its corporate creditors. Marxist totalitarians driven by rich capitalistic fat cats, both of whom would prefer the general populace, so preoccupied with interclass strugglings and identity politics, they got no time to question the school curriculum. Liberal marketeers endorsing fascistic monopolies, philanthropists funding their own foundations can get very fucking complicated to anyone who can barely wrap their head around chicken nuggets being their staple food of choice. And the more complex it becomes, the more likely they are to accept governance from anybody who can guarantee them their chicken nuggets, or at least claim they can. And the further away they are, the better they can see the big picture that needs to be painted all over the world. And as our spirits deplete, to digitally enhance their ways non-stop, polluting any divine or even natural interference in our upward, downward, inside, outside, fashionably trending, freely spiraling descent into 24/7 chattering and clattering sounds and furies, signifying nothing but stress, anxiety, depression, and fear of failing to prove their worth to a government that essentially doesn't give a fucking damn if you live or die, because they got bigger fish to fry, and cod that ain't been battered is a delicacy fit only for the fittest to survive this natural and human holocaust. It's in the name of making this world a safer place to live in. It's a thought. It's a thought for anybody who thinks their thought might count anymore, at least to their own mind and well-being, or anybody who thinks business is being taken care of, and God, goodness, love, compassion, empathy, it's got nothing to do with anything really, could impede progress and dilute graven imaginings. Everybody loved Audrey Hepburn. Repeated enough times on mass media, feel like you're out of touch if you don't. She radiated from that screen like a goddess. Those eyes, that smile, that lithe anorexic body could make you want to throw up with veneration. Even in real life, Hollywood behind-the-scenes promo newsreels, her luster remained intact. And is this what reality has become? At least if you're not in the business, start using your own imagination. Could be bad for their business, but maybe your own imagination behind the scenery is the most real thing you got going for you. If it could just fire itself without false idle projectiles being shoved in your face to keep you hanging on for dear life. Audrey lives. She's dead, but thanks to technology, her charm lives on forever. Echoes of Frankenstein and Dracula and Vlad the Impaler. History in process of mythologizing itself, or vice versa. Humanity vampiring itself. Choose your archetype and act accordingly. Father figures, mother figures, sibling figures, heroes, villains, children of the damned, children of the blessed, dirty-faced angels, meticulously groomed devils, Attila the Hun recovering from a brutal childhood, Jesus, the failure of carpentry, goes off to heal the sick, comes a cropper for not filing his taxes and dispensing unlicensed non-pharmaceuticals that are about to give him life in Maximus when they discovered he's got a history of violence. Did you or did you not upturn those tables, make a mess and confront the Pharisees with a threatening expression? Well, I can't tell a lie. Okay, crucify him, guilty as charged. Next case. It's a test case. What are we testing for? To see if he has a case. Simulations of a reality that finally won't be able to die even its own natural death. Humanity on the chopping block to perfect a world for dementedly psychopathic lumberjacks. And shouldn't we suspect something's rotten in this global Denmark? So many have served so taxably to no end but losing their case on a technicality. All I wanted was a room somewhere. Give it time. Give it time. Normal service will be resumed as soon as we've renormalized it. Meanwhile, lock all your doors, bar the windows, pull the sheets over your head and be afraid. Be very, very afraid. Don't you just love being scared out of your wits? I've never wanted another father figure. I'd already had a father figure. He taught me all he knew. The rest I had to learn for myself. I wasn't going to give up my mind up and away to anybody who didn't create life and death. And I'd long since let me dad off the hook for that. Biological imperatives. Apparently not so much these days. More scientific initiatives. Freedom of choice. You can go forth and contracept it, abort it, or have it adopted by the state. Put it in the right hands or homes or laboratories. Freedom of choice, right? Once you sign it over, once you disown your own biology, research and experimentation are for granted. It's no secret that babies are a valuable commodity on the free market. Give me a child till he's 5 years old and I will show you the man. My version of it. Now, there's a dangerously nuanced concept. Pavlov's dog got some skilled parenting, became a model citizen. Behavioral science, big business, expertise in carrots and sticks, alarm clocking and bell ringing, how to keep a mind preoccupied without knowing it's already been invaded, a mind of your own. There's a very tenuous state of being these days, under siege. A body of your own, even more so, when you're told you can't move it anywhere else unless it's absolutely fucking essential, and brushing up against any foreign bodies could be a death sentence. Ramp up the fear factor, ease down on neighbourly advice, and focus on survival at all costs. You can lie, but only if you know the truth is not in somebody else's interest. How would we know this? Well, the behavioural scientists told us we're all in this together, apart from the ones who know better and are making a good living out of being that smart. Good being a highly dangerous, nuanced concept that can possibly be bad for somebody else. But nobody's to blame. It's just the world we live in. Have you lost your bearings? Well, bear with it. We're still putting all your data into the computer. Should have some predictive readout by the morning. We'll let you know if it's safe to be alive and what you're doing wrong to not keep it. So how to put it right, okay? We'll need to give you a brain scan to make sure there's nothing developing in there that might change your mind. Holy gods and goddesses of cardiac arrest, with sound accreditations from Oxford, Cambridge, Yale, Harvard, and all affiliated institutions in between. I should take the knee and thank the Pope. He's not in charge. This is the best world he can come up with. We are ruled. We are ruled by the planets. If Mercury's in retrograde, Pisces dropped into the aquarium, and Lady Gaga's in the hot tub with Elton John, what else should we think but that the stars have taken over from the planets, and the Freemasons are behind everything, including the Grateful Dead, the Beastie Boys, and that old hound dog Elvis, who began gyrating on cue and lost much of his natural magic to the voodoo of high definition. Not that most Freemasons suspect a thing, just trying to be civic-mindedly useful, but some modest research with an unjaundiced eye in their own favour, they discover their 33rd Nova levels have been infiltrated by Sabbatean Franquists. Google it. Though I'll probably tell you it's just a conspiracy theory, because Google was infiltrated at its very inception. Paranoia starts here. Or awareness. You decide which is more conducive to avoiding any panic decision making. It has a documentable history, but hey, so does Elvis. We can't mistrust everything, for Christ's sake. It's not the Jews who run Hollywood, it's the Freemasons, machinating that dream factory, manufacturing at least all our daydreams. You want to believe it or you don't. Do I know what your fucking truth is? Do I know what the truth? I'm still deciding what mine is. I have a vivid memory. I must have been 15, maybe 16 years old. I was working a summer job in a local factory, hanging out with the grown-ups for a smoke break on some milk crates in an outside back lot. And this guy starts expounding at great length in very specific detail about an event that just occurred in Afghanistan. And I'm thinking, how does he know that? Though I must have been aware how and why he thinks he knows that, from the newspaper or BBC, but I couldn't resist saying, how do you know that? How do you know that? You weren't there at the time. He looked at me like I was just some cocky 15 or 16-year-old who'd learned nothing yet about the real world. Stubbed out his ciggy under his boot, shrugged, and went back to his conveyor belt. But I couldn't help thinking I had a point. No clear idea at the time what the fuck it was, but something had shifted in my mind about what reality might or might not be, and how it can be shaped or misshaped by mediated narratives designed to fulfill some general consensus that some people obviously know more about reality than others and are better equipped to deal or thrive in it. And if you spend half your life at the end of a conveyor belt and most the other half down a pub or watching TV, it may, in truth, limit your credibility as a true storyteller, especially about stuff that happened in Afghanistan. If he'd expounded on his personal response to the story he'd heard, maybe fact, maybe fiction, but he found it very interesting and worthy of some analysis. Not just stated it as an outright fact. Well, it must be true because he did it on the BBC, impartial, unbiased, and articulated to an established degree. How are you supposed to know what's going on in the world? Well, maybe you're not, unless you happen to be in it at the time. He did teach me a lesson, so kudos to him. I think he was just trying to appear educated, which taught me another lesson, the value of appearing to be educated. Though I was already being taught that at school. I mean, if you want to get ahead in the world, just make sure you appear to have the right education, because you can be educated wrongly. In which case, you may be lucky to get a job at the end of a conveyor belt. So many educated people these days being demonized, blackballed, blacklisted, banned from any mainstream public discourse for wrong-headedly not following the right curriculum. Their perception of reality has gone dangerously haywire and could threaten the whole world, hell of a claim, unless you believe most people in the world don't have and may never have a mind or a reality of their own. They much prefer the bit box or Hollywood version, the dream factories manufacturing at least all our daydreams can make even failure seem like a success. I mean, if a movie or a series starring a failure was a success, you might start dreaming of being a failure. Because if the whole world is watching you fail, wouldn't that make you a success? You failed heroically, courageously, photogenically, faced up to your demons and took it on the box office chin. Raging alcoholics, demented serial killers, monsters of all shapes and sizes, so long as you went down fighting in a hit movie. The lonely girl who can never possibly be really lonely. The penniless drifter who obviously lived in a big fucking house in Beverly Hills can really fuck with your head, especially if you start playing your life as if you're living in a movie. You're the star surrounded by character actors, supporting cameos, and lots of extras for credibility. All these people gathered together just to make sure you successfully fail. Of course, it does leave you vulnerable to subsequent box office fluctuations, but at least you've had one successful failure in your life. Maybe better to be one shiny coin in a never-ending light source and not keep shoving in bus tokens trying to defraud your ultimate landlord in constant dread you might face eviction. You're going to have to try again, this time as a chipmunk. You crazy resurrection, reincarnation, this get real. Now is now and never shall be not now. One life at a time. Some things are bigger than the apparently biggest. Submit yourself to temporary documentation. I'd have to think it's you living in a fucking dream world, in constant fear of it turning into a nightmare on 666 Elm Street. Don't you just love a good exorcism? Especially if it's not real. Possession is 9/10 of the law of averages. Reality can't be a percentage of itself, no more than truth can have a sequel, no more than nature can be an unnatural thing. Put a label on yourself, you're at the mercy of being bottled up by the manufacturers of contaminated containment. It's the spirit genie needs to be free. Dispirit yourself of your own genius, your body's got no fucking chance of escaping that cornered address. And as soon as you realize that, you have entered the universe of metaphysics, ruled only by your own imagination, not somebody else's, which might choose to bring you down to formulaics most suitable to their own imaginative ambitions. To be an aristocracy among peasants that has no grounding in spatial, timeless reality and truth. Room for all and no time for speciously hierarchical confabulations. You either fucking believe it or you don't. If you don't, good luck with battling other people's imaginations. As soon as we're born, we're preparing to die. You want to die a disposably fictional document? Just sign here on the dotted line, roll up your sleeve, and we'll take care of everything. To the moon, Alice. To the moon. Why? Well, if you need to ask. Day 12. Ketchup on your crepe Suzette. Back to the scarred, scared, squared one. What does it mean? What does it mean to be, what is your name? What is your favorite color? What does it mean to be, is it really a horror show or a Monty Python epic? Animation of survival at all costs, in a hostile world at the mercy not only of wild animals but of each other, as the only animal nature created so willing to slaughter its own species. An aberration of nature, its own predator and prey, from birth crawling into our own cage of choice that'll keep us safest, maneuvering a labyrinth of disputed truths and disputed lies and undisputable diktats from our self-elected experts, selective corporate zillionaire representatives, democracy off the table, crumpled on the floor of a hen house, ruled by foxes who represent only their next meal. Such an ingeniously sly famishment for no end to their feasting. If this isn't a fucking coup d'etat, I don't know what is. We gave you a republic, but I'll be damned if I think you can keep it. Maybe I just don't know what is. Maybe our etat's been cooped for years, and now a culling to end all culling, a double whammy intrigue to confound even the most resilient dissenter, a shocking disclosure from a supremely accredited medical expert who once worked for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So he's either a bona fide whistleblower or a duplicitous shill to up the fear and damned if you do, damned if you don't factor, a leaky vaccine, an ultimately ingenious weapon of mass destruction that will decimate all the non-vaccinated who sublimely thought they were evading the cull. Put that in your refusing it, don't compliance, and smoke it. It's that gotcha moment. Don't you just love a good conspiracy movie? At least you do. So what does it mean to be human, feeling like you really have nothing to lose? But that label on a bottle, whose contents have never clearly been defined other than a physically manifested species, in a world of countless variants of species, most of whom we've never met in person and never really wanted to, and I'm sure the feeling's mutual. Nature seems to prefer hanging out with its own. Fair enough, seems fair enough. I go swimming in the ocean, I may get eaten by a shark for trespassing. Perfectly natural, nothing malevolent about it. I must have decided the risk was worth it. Malevolence in the mind only of those who consider humanity somehow has prime dibs on this planet, because we're smarter than everybody else. We can eat more of you than you can of us, sneak into your domain and catch you out when you're not looking. Tasty. We know where you live. Here, take a bite on this chicken nugget. We're the experts in organized crime, stealing stuff that may not want to be stolen. So expert, we made it totally legal and ethically bound to preserve it in cans, as a natural and civilized as cutting your toenails to avoid snagging your socks. A gift from our Godfather. As he is in heaven, so he is on earth. He bestrides the universe with mighty hammer and nails, builds for us a vast housing estate from our own sweat in equity. Just pay your dues and he'll keep you safe for all eternity. Amen. Women just ride on their coattails and do the housekeeping unless they prove themselves a true goddess, servant of our Lord and Master, in which case they too will be given the red carpet treatment, symbolizing all the blood sacrifices of sweat inequity. Hey, it's one way of explaining all this, what it means to be human. We may love each other, but first we have to love our Lord, or at least show him some fucking respect for all he did he for us. At what point in human history did humanity accept it was not master or mistress of its own fateful existence, that external operatives ruled our internal experience, developed a collective conscientiousness that outweighed most, if not all, our individual conscientiousness, that information flowing freely from your own psyche should be damned or overruled by the hard evidence, raining down on you from mediated can preservers. The consciousness of self needs to surrender to masterfully amassed mediated diktats, whether they harmonize with your personal well-being or not. Your internal ethic adapts to the external realpolitik of a well-organized protection racket. Otherwise, you may be classified rogue element, liable to provoke a riot or slit somebody else's throat just because you feel like it, though never once have I considered such as conducive to my personal well-being. It's as if somebody decided there's a demon seed in every embryo, which needs to be very carefully monitored, managed, and medicated from birth to grave. And that's pretty much the story of your life, trying to prove to some external authority that you're worthy of a pat on the back and not a kick in the ass. I mean, look what you can become, as if your whole being is governed by your eyeballs, the mirrors to your soul or mind. There's a lot going on behind those biological orbs that you don't know about. These days, that seems to be becoming a problem. Could be a conspiracy stirring in my brain to not comply with certain edicts that make no fucking sense to my well-being and seem to be leading to some unnatural coup de grace to put an end to any personal developments. I may need some re-education, but am I not getting that simply by being alive? Was my birth not traumatic enough I have to compound it with your interest in planning my general existence? Not my responsibility to figure out who or what I am, or who or what you are, or I should offer precedence to decide and define my most essentials, and the rest be up for grabs. There was a time when women could be burned at the stake as a witch for talking to a tree or a cat, or communing with nature like it was perfectly natural, even though they knew they were breaking the rules, breaking the laws, till the rules were changed. The laws were overruled, and now it could be a death sentence for wearing the wrong fucking hat, or the right hat at the wrong time, worshipping the wrong god, tweeting the wrong opinion, or venturing outside your rightfully designated jurisdiction. Throughout human history, laws have been changed, amended, or re-invoked to suit somebody else's unresolved traumas and lack of personal fulfillment. So frustrated and self-disempowered, they need to manifest their fractured psychoses as mass contagion, spread their infection like a plague on nature, which they blame for fucking them up in the first place. They should never have been born, or at least not to dysfunctionally schizoid liars and hypocrites. So the beatings must go on. And whose fault is that? We either share the blame or we take the blame, and the punishment comes with it, self-inflicted or otherwise. Hey, if you can't trust yourself to make peace with yourself, how the fuck are you going to trust anybody else? It's a fair question. We seek the unique, which is in us all, but has to be mastered by ourselves. No faking it. That's just show business. Being alive is not a business transaction. We shook hands with eternity, rolled the dice, and it came up one. Keep shaking it, you're bound to come up with multiples and multiples till you finally realize you should have settled for the one. The imperial self. Don't you just love? Cuts through all the other bullshit, of course. Of course, it's not as easy as it sounds, but neither is faking it or hating it. Hey, Christmas in the trenches. Somebody told me the other day there was a workshop going on teaching people how to be happy. And I wondered, how happy would you have to be to lead a workshop on it? Clowns to the right of me, clowns to the left of me. You'd think I'd be happy enough by now. Why am I still waiting for me goodie bag? You'd think they could settle for inviting you to a party and just showing you how to be happy. Happiness and love. Whole independent world of difference. They should be leading a workshop on how to be happy being sad, how to love your enemy without feeling bad for them, or how to hate your enemy without feeling bad for yourself. It's a lovely war. Even if you lost, at least you know somebody won. Can't beat them, join them. Then we can all be winners together. Christmas in the synagogue. All Muslims invited. Lay down your arms. We'll promise not to kick you in the teeth. It's no funny. So much cruelty in the world. But it's not coming from me. If it's coming from you, I can recommend this workshop, because you're obviously not happy. And that makes me sad. Don't you just love a good tearjerker? Brings out all the love in you. Hey, it's a wonder-filled life. If we can make it a wonderful death, who knows? Maybe we can all go to heaven after all. You either believe it or you don't. And if you don't, well, try imagining you do then. Try imagining all the steps you have to climb to get to that belief, and all the steps you have to climb to believe is not just your imagination playing tricks on you. Then imagine all the tricks somebody else's imagination might be playing on you. Then imagine what manner of belief would demand deception, division, cruelty, chaos, and fear as confirmation of its belief. Then imagine you've been hypnotized and you're no longer in control even of your own imagination. So all you can imagine is what somebody else told you to believe. Then imagine how desperately disheartened you'd be if you finally realized you never used your own imagination at all. So in truth, you believed in nothing, just left it for somebody else to decide, and they did. And you have nobody to blame but yourself for being such a patsy in somebody else's assassination of yourself. And if you can imagine that, well, maybe that's a good first step to reimagining your own self and its relationship to all the deceit, division, cruelty, chaos, and fear that's casting a spell over your own experience of this world and possibly the next. What goes around badly may come around even fucking worse, but you don't know that. I don't know that. I don't know what the fucking truth is, but I'll be damned if I let somebody else decide it for me without comparative facts and fictions I can assimilate into my own self and make my own mind up what I believe. And didn't waste my life on somebody else's version of it. We've been living somebody else's life for so long. We have no idea who or what our original self is. Maybe this is why we're always trying to make somebody else happy. How natural am I? How alien to my own body, my own mind, my own world. Special effects, the best I can look forward to in a human society so fractured from its origins, so traumatized by unnatural birth pangs, it's become afraid of its own shadow and its own natural organism, so distempered and disintegrated by unnatural laws and orders coming at us from all angles. I have no idea where my center is anymore. And if truth is at the center, how can I not be living a lie? Any truth without integrity is bound to be a lie. Any integrity that compromises its truth inevitably forfeits its grace before its maker. Who or what made this world that's become but a natural resource to remake an artificial construct of what I must deem to be better, even though it leaves me not even in the center of myself. Ego, sum imperium. I am in control. But I'm not in control, not even of my own self, in which case somebody else is. And why would I allow that to be possible, never mind preferable? I've lost my relationship to my own creation, so busy working and recreating on its recreations, at the mercy of a manufactured organism that may discard me as defective at any moment. I've seen no defections in nature, only when it's been interfered with by artifice. We talk about arts and deface it at the same time, put nature into a frame and display it in a museum, and wonder how anybody could be so inspired and skillful they could capture what was never meant to be captured, simply attuned to. If we are indeed an integral part of it, and not just flotsam washed up on the shores of science and technology, and a supernature that seeks to outdo its origins and cast originality into history's documentabilities. I may eventually learn to control myself, but to demand control of somebody else is a fool's or a villain's game. And to live in somebody else's world is to live in a fool's or a villain's paradise. Only a fool or a villain would make the same mistakes again and again and again deliberately. The truly wise never go there, too centrally occupied, listening to the winds of natural change and gathering the rosebuds while they may. Youth should never be wasted on aging badly. Day 13. Friday. My lucky day. My lucky number. So I left it blank. Didn't want to push my luck. And now, a word from my sponsor. Run, rabbit, run, rabbit, run, run, run. Don't give the farmer his fun, fun, fun. He'll get by without his rabbit pie. Ah, the good old days, when every song deserved a melody, and every dance an opportunity to grab your partner and do a two-step. Humor is not an option, it's a requirement.